Alright, this is Job 9 in the MacArthur Study Bible and the Endearing Word Commentary. So a little refresher on chapter 8. Bildad was the second friend to talk, and he basically told Job to repent of his sin, and you'll be prosperous once again if you do. But he was a little bit more rash about it than Eliphaz was. Alright. And so now Job is going to respond to Eliphaz in chapter 9. It's probably going to be a long video, so just bear with me. Alright. So chapter 9, Job's frustration with the power and the majesty of God. Or the MacArthur title, there is no mediator. Alright, so the first 13 verses, Job praises the wisdom and the strength of God, though it means that God is beyond Job's wisdom. Alright, first 13 verses. Then Job answered and said, "Truly, I know it is so, but how can a man be righteous before God? If one wished to contend with him, he could not answer him one time out of 1,000. God is wise in heart and mighty in strength. Who has hardened himself against him and prospered? He removes the mountains, and they do not know when he overturns them in his anger. He shakes the earth out of its place, and its pillars tremble. He commands the sun, and it does not rise. He seals off the stars. He alone spreads the heavens and treads on the waves of the sea. He made the bear, Orion, and the Pleiades, however you say that, and the chambers of the south. The Pleiades. In the chambers of the south, he does great things. He does great things past finding out, yes, wonders without number. If he goes by me, I do not see him. If he moves past, I do not perceive him. If he takes away, who can hinder him? Who can say to him, what are you doing? God will not withdraw his anger. The allies of the proud lie prostrate beneath him." Okay, so what's being said here? Alright, well, I'm going to start with MacArthur real quick, and then I'll get to Endearing Word. So, now this is actually a summary here of the chapters 9 and 10, but I'll go ahead and read it. So Job, in a mood of deep despair, he responded to Bildad's accusations with arguments surrounding God's nature, also raised by Bildad, and he started to rationalize something about which he would later admit he knew dangerously little. Job concluded that God is holy, wise, and strong, but he wondered if he is fair, and why wouldn't he make himself known to him? Before the mighty God, Job felt only despair. If God is not fair, all is hopeless, he thought. Okay. So let me start with this. So now I'll get to Endearing Word, and then I'll go back to MacArthur. Alright, truly it is so. Truly it is so. This is how he begins to answer Bildad. So Job's answer seems to be more gracious than the hard words Bildad had for Job in the previous chapter. So he began by agreeing with Bildad's general promise that the Lord rewards the righteous and corrects or judges sinners. Alright. And then he actually asked this question, but how can a man be righteous before God? That's a good question. Job's response to Bildad was widely stated. Job obviously suffered more than normal, yet no one could rightly accuse him of sinning more than normal. If Job was not righteous before God, then how could any man be? That's a good question. So it's important for us to understand that the Bible speaks of human righteousness in two senses. One, a man can be righteous in a relative sense, where one can properly be considered as righteous among men. Both Noah and Job were, as both Noah and Job were considered. And a man can be righteous in a forensic, or legal sense, declared and considered righteous by God through faith. Yep, and that's how we end up becoming righteous before God, through faith in Jesus Christ. Even though we ourselves are not actually righteous, but we're clothed in the righteousness of Christ, so God looks at us as though we are righteous, even though we're really not. Yeah. And Job's question here concerns the first aspect of righteousness, though it's also relevant to the other aspect of righteousness. So Job primarily wanted to know, if I had not been righteous enough to escape the judgment of God, then who can be? Yet, in the ultimate sense, Job's question is the most important question in the world. How can man find God's approval? How can man be considered righteous and not guilty before God? Well, the answer is through Jesus Christ. Yeah, how can man ever be righteous before God when we're wretched sinners and deserve his judgment? Yep, it's because of what Christ did. He lived the righteous life that we should have lived, even though we did not. And he took our punishment on the cross. Yep, he suffered the wrath that we deserved on the cross because we did not live righteously. We broke his laws, but he kept the law for us and suffered our punishment so that we would not have to. And then we can, and by putting faith in him, his righteousness is credited to our account, and we're treated as though we lived the righteous life that Christ lived, even though we did not. And thus we are forgiven of our sin. This is the good news of the gospel. This is Christianity 101. So that's pretty much the answer to Job's question. All right. And I think I'm going to mention the gospel again whenever Job gets a little bit further down to verse 33, when he talks about having no mediator. So stay tuned. All right, verse 3. If one wished to contend with him, he could not answer him one time out of 1,000. All right, MacArthur has something to say here. So Job referred to disputing one's innocence or guilt before God as just a useless endeavor. And Psalm 130, verse 3 illustrates this point. Yep. If you should mark iniquities, who could stand? Let me actually turn there. I don't know if that had the full quote, so I'll go ahead and turn there. Psalm 130, verse 3. If you, Lord, should mark iniquities, O Lord, who can stand? And I'll go ahead and read verse 4. But there's forgiveness with you that you may be feared. So the psalmist is basking in the glow of God's never-ending forgiveness. Yep. Now, if it wasn't for Jesus Christ, then there would be no hope for us being forgiven, and we could not stand against God, and our iniquities would totally be marked, and they would not be canceled out if it wasn't for Christ. So, anyway. All right. And now I'll see what Enduring Word says about this. So one wished to contend with him, he could not answer one time out of 1,000. So Job understood that man could not debate with God or demand answers from him. Sadly, this will be the basic sin of Job. Job ends up doing this. He demands answers, and this is the sin that he actually repents of at the end of the book. So here the word contend is basically a technical term for conducting a lawsuit, according to this Anderson guy. All right, and then God is wise in heart, mighty in strength, who has hardened himself against him and prospered. Nobody. He removes the mountains and they do not know when he overturns them in anger. So basically talking about his great power. And then he shakes the earth out of its place and its pillars tremble. Alright, and MacArthur has something to say about this. In the figurative language of the day, this phrase, the pillars tremble, it described the supporting power that secured the position of the earth in the universe. Yeah, so. But of course, the Lord is not literally shaking the earth out of its place, and yeah, basically that's secure in the in the position of the earth, or I guess the axis that would keep the earth in its position. So anyway, but basically just highlighting the fact that God is all powerful and mighty in strength, as he said in verse 4. Alright, and then verse 7, he commands the sun, it does not rise. He seals off the stars. And then he alone spreads out the heavens, and he treads the waves. And he treads on the waves of the sea. He made the bear, Orion, and the Pleiades. Yeah, Pleiades, however you say that. Pleiades. In the chambers of the south. Alright. Now, MacArthur says these are 3 stellar constellations. And then Enduring Word says, Job praised the great might of God who created the worlds, and he put the sun and the stars in the sky. Yet the might of God was no comfort to Job. It just made him feel that God was more distant than ever. In the chambers of the south, according to John Trapp, the most remote, hidden, secret parts of the south, so called because the stars which are under the southern pole are hidden from us and are enclosed and lodged as in a chamber. And MacArthur says something else about this. The chambers of the south were just other constellations in the southern hemisphere, unseen by those who could see, and name those 3 constellations in the northern skies. Alright. And then he does great things, finding out. He does great things past, finding out. Yes, wonders without number. Yeah. Wonders without number. Yeah. And then here's a little note on who's hardened himself and prospered. Yeah. And Job agreed with the basic premise of Bildad that one is never blessed by the hardening of one's self against God. Yet Job did not think that this principle applied to himself in this situation because he knew in his heart that he had not hardened himself against God. Yeah, which is true. He did not. If he did, I'm sure probably he wouldn't have been called righteous in the beginning. Because, a righteous person, is not going to go on hardening their hearts before God. So, alright. And he does great things in the past, finding out, yes, wonders without number. So, Job considered the great works of God in the universe. Yeah, this is Enduring Word again. And how they displayed the majesty and power of God. Yet this understanding of the greatness and might of God did not comfort Job. It just made him feel that God was too great to either notice. If he goes by me, I do not see him. That God just doesn't notice what's going on with Job. Or he just doesn't care to, or care to help Job. Or doesn't really seem to come and help him. God will not withdraw his anger. If he goes past me, I do not see him. If he moves past, I do not perceive him. If he takes away, who can hinder him? Who can say to him, what are you doing? Yeah, yeah, God will not withdraw his anger. The allies of the proud prostrate beneath him. All right. So it was as if Job cried out, "Why is God so hard to figure out?" His friends did not think that God was hard to figure out. The problem was too simple for them. Job had sinned in such a bad and unusual way, and therefore all the disaster came upon him. Yet Job, not knowing all the truth as revealed in the first 2 chapters, but at least knowing his own heart and integrity, knew that God was not so simple to figure out. Yeah, and he's not. Yeah, who can understand the ways of God? His ways are higher than ours, his thoughts are higher than ours, as it says in Isaiah 55. All right, and then the end of verse 13, the allies of the proud lie prostrate beneath him. As Mason demonstrates, there's many thoughts in this passage that connect with Jesus. Yeah, I'll start with the endearing word, and then I'll look at MacArthur. All right, so we read that God treads on the waves of the sea, and Jesus walked on water. And we read that God made the bear, Orion, and Pleiades. A star was made to announce the birth of Jesus. We read that God does great things past finding out. Yes, wonders without number, and Jesus did uncountable miracles and great things. John says, he did so many things that not even the books could contain what he's done. And we read that God moves past, and I do not perceive him, and Jesus could pass through an angry crowd as if he were invisible. Yep. When they tried to put him to death at the end of John 8, he departed and went away, or when they tried to throw him off a cliff in his hometown, he was able to escape from the crowd. And we read that no one can say to God, "What are you doing?" And in the life of Jesus, it would come to pass that no one dared ask him any more questions. And we read that God would not withdraw his anger, so we are not surprised that Jesus sometimes showed anger. And we read it is said of God, the allies of the proud lie prostrate beneath him, and so also the evil spirits fall prostrate at the feet of Jesus. And every knee's going to bow and every tongue is going to confess that Jesus is Lord. Yeah, those who were friends or enemies. So, and what a wonderful irony there is in seeing Job describe the immortal and invisible God, and in the process paint a stunningly accurate portrayal of the earthly Jesus, according to this Mason guy. In the very chapter where Job seems to beg for Jesus to come in all his offices, he's powerfully and accurately anticipating Jesus' coming. According to Mason. Whether Job realized it or not. All right. And MacArthur has something to say about the proud, or literally Rahab. This symbolic of the ancient mythical sea monster, which was actually talked about in chapter 7, the Leviathan, sea serpent or whatever. And God smiting the proud was a poetic way of saying that if the mythical monster of the sea, a metaphor for powerful and evil chaotic forces, could not stand before God's anger, how can Job hope to? In the battle in God's court, he would lose. God is too strong. And apart from Christ, you lose. The only way you can the only way you can stand on the day of judgment is to be clothed in the righteousness of Christ, and that way the eternal judgment that you deserve for your sin passes over you. Which is actually what the Passover is about. All right. And then you get to verses 14 and 20. Job wonders how to answer such a mighty God. How then can I answer him and choose my words to reason with him? For though I were righteous, I could not answer him. I would beg mercy of my judge. If I called and he answered me, I would not believe that he was listening to my voice. For he crushes me with the tempest and multiplies my wounds without cause. He will not allow me to catch my breath, but fills me with bitterness. If it is a matter of strength, indeed he is strong, and if of justice, who will appoint my day in court? Though I were righteous, my own mouth would condemn me. Though I were blameless, it would prove me perverse. All right. So then, all right, I'm going to start with a nearing word. So how then can I answer him? So Job's problem was clear. He understood that God is righteous and mighty. What he can't understand is that how God will use that. What he can't understand is how God will use that righteousness or might to help him. God seemed distant and impersonal to Job and to many who suffer. All right. Well, and this is a big problem, with those who are suffering persecution and just suffering other things like sicknesses and disease or whatever. It's easy to think that God is far and distant, but that's not the case. Especially here. Job may feel this way, but that's not the case. God is here the whole time and really helping Job get through it, and he's not denying the faith, even though he is not feeling good, but he's still holding on to his faith. He still believes in God. He's not ultimately cursing God and rejecting God. And ultimately God is holding him up even in the midst of all this, even if it seems like he's far away. All right. And then MacArthur says, how can I answer? Well, verse 15, after that verse, can I answer him and choose my words to reason with him? For though I were righteous, I could not answer him. All right, so MacArthur says he means here not sinless, but having spiritual integrity, i.e. a pure heart to love, serve, and obey God. He was affirming again that his suffering was not due to his sins, to sins that he was not willing to confess. Even at that, God found something to condemn him for. He felt making it hopeless then. He thought that God would still find something to condemn him for, making it hopeless then to contend with God. All right. And I would beg for mercy of my judge. If I called and he answered me, I would not believe that he was listening to my voice. All right, for he crushes me with the tempest and multiplies my wounds without cause. All right, endearing word. So Job felt that God's might was against him and not for him. In this sense, it did no good for Job to consider the awesome power of God, because that power seemed to be set against him. And this guy Lawson says, when Job says he is guiltless, he's not claiming to be sinless. He's not espousing moral perfection, just relative innocence. He doesn't believe he's done anything to deserve this kind of treatment. Job, according to this Smith guy, Job saw God's power as if it were a sovereign freedom, and uncontrollable power that works mysteriously to do whatever he wills, so that no one can stop and ask, what are you doing? All right. Though I were righteous, my own mouth would condemn me. So if Job were to proclaim his own righteousness, it would not be true. If he were to proclaim his own righteousness, the words themselves would be evidence enough and of pride and arrogance to condemn him. If he were to proclaim his own righteousness, he would say that God is wrong about man. All right, Spurgeon has something to say. Years ago, there was an old man in Wiltshire who according to his own statement was 103 years of age. He had never neglected his parish church. He had brought up 11 children, and he had no help from the parish. And he expected that by and by he should go home to God, for he had never done anything wrong in his life that he knew about, that he knowed about. But someone said to him, "You are a sinner, you know." "I know I ain't," he said. "Yeah, well, but God says that you are." And what do you think? Yep. And what do you think did that old man reply? And what think you did that old man reply? Yeah, what did that old man say? He said, "God may see what he likes, but I know I ain't." So you see, he never contradicted. So you see, he even contradicted God himself. And is not that a great sin for someone to commit, to contradict God? Yeah. Yeah. And that, making the point that if you say something, it's, like Job was saying, even though I'm righteous, whatever I say, it would condemn me anyway. That's what he thought. And then Spurgeon highlighted, the fact of saying that this guy thought he wasn't a sinner, even though God said he was. Just to highlight the danger in contradicting God, which Job would think he would if he ended up speaking up for his righteousness, basically saying, even though I'm righteous, God can say that, well, you say that, but really that's showing that you're not really righteous. That's, I guess, what he thinks. Yeah. All right, and then Job 9:20 says that if a man justifies himself, his own words will condemn him. But Romans 8:33 through 34 tells us that if God justifies a man, then no one can condemn him. Yeah. Yep. All right. And ultimately, we could say that we're righteous before God if we actually have Jesus Christ. If we have trusted in Jesus Christ, I mean, that's really the only way you can really make that claim, by your faith. All right. Yeah, though I were righteous and though I were blameless, it would prove me perverse. So Job gave the eloquent voice to his exasperation. He felt as though there was nothing he could do to please God or ever to come into his favor again. And even if he claimed innocence, or even though he could speak up about being righteous, it would still do him no good. It would probably just lead to condemnation. Yeah. Or he would be proven perverse even though he would be blameless, even though he says he's blameless. So, well, that's what he thinks anyway. All right. Indeed, the only accusation he will listen to will be from God himself. But if God does enter into the litigation, then Job is worried that he will not be able to carry out his defense triumphantly, according to this Anderson guy. Even though at the very beginning God did say that Job is righteous. So, since he had faith in the one true God. Yeah, I mean, that's how you end up becoming righteous. You believe in the one true God and the God-man, Jesus Christ. So, and now we're about to get to more of Jesus when Job is longing for a mediator between himself and God. All right, verses 21 through 24. All right. I am blameless, yet I do not know myself. I despise my life. It is all one thing. Therefore I say, he destroys the blameless and the wicked. He destroys the blameless and the wicked. If the scourge slays suddenly, he laughs at the plight of the innocent. The earth is given into the hand of the wicked. He covers the faces of its judges. If it's not he, who else could it be? Alright, so endearing word has something to say here. So Job is explaining his own inability to defend himself before God. I am blameless, yet I do not know myself. So Job gave vent to his tortured feelings. He genuinely believed that he was blameless, yet at the same time he admitted that he did not know himself enough. He did not know himself well enough to have a completely clear conscience. Alright, and then this guy Poole says, so the sense is that though God should give a sentence for me, yet I should be so overwhelmed with the dread and terror of the divine majesty that I should be wary of my own life. Okay, verse 22. It's all one thing, therefore I say he destroys the blameless and the wicked. Yeah, if the scourge slays suddenly, he laughs at the plight of the innocent. Alright, Job felt that not only God was distant and silent, but he was also having a sport at the expense of godly sufferers like Job. That basically God was getting a kick out of Job, watching Job suffer. He was basically enjoying himself. Even though, of course, that's not true. Scripture actually says God has no pleasure in the death of the wicked. He doesn't desire that any should perish, but people come to Christ. Now, of course, Job is not a wicked man's, since God sees him as righteous. So, but anyway. But if God doesn't have pleasure in the death of the wicked, then he definitely would not be taking pleasure in a righteous person suffering. Alright. So, but sadly, Job feels that way. That God is enjoying watching Job suffer. Alright, Spurgeon has something to say. As one is startled by a shriek or saddened by a groan, so these sharp utterances of Job astonish us at first, and then awake our pity. Physical sufferings had produced a strain on Job's mind, and he sought relief by expressing his anguish. Like some solitary prisoner in the gloomy keep of an old castle, he carves on the walls pictures of the abject despondencies which haunt him. His afflictions are aggravated by vain efforts to alleviate them, and his wounds, his hand with the rough hammer and his hand with a rough hammer and nail with which he is engraving his griefs. Of such tortures many of us have had a taste. And we must remember that we know so well about Job's situation from chapters 1 and 2, and it was completely unknown to Job at this time. He describes the world as it looks to him. From what Job can see of God, according to this Poole guy, his outward carriage is the same to both. He neglects the innocent, and he seems not to answer their prayers, and suffers them to perish with the others as if he took pleasure in their ruin also, which is not true. And then this Schmick guy says, the developing spiritual crisis in Job has to do with his misapprehension of God. Tozer, A.W. Tozer, wrote, the most important thing about you is what comes to mind when you think of God. Alright. And Job's conception of God was becoming quite understandably twisted by his own experience and imagination. This God of Job's imagination was worse than morally indifferent. He even mocked the despair of the innocent and blocked the administering of justice, according to this Schmick guy. Alright. Alright, and then MacArthur says this. About he covers the faces of its judges. Now Job here indicted God for the iniquities of his world. He accused God of treating all the same way unfairly, and of even covering the eyes of the earthly judges so that they would not see injustice. There are charges that bring, yeah, and these are actually charges that bring about God's rebuke of Job in the final chapters, for which he ends up repenting of. And really, he's actually going against his own sayings by saying, who are we to question God and all that, or say these various things about God and what he does. All right. And if it is not he, who else can it be? Could it be? So Job's logic was solid. Back to enduring word. He understood that his situation could be traced back to God. That Clark on the earth is given into the hands of the wicked. Yeah, Clark on the earth is given into the hands of the wicked. The beginning of verse 24. The earth is given into the hand of the wicked. It's not evident that the worst men possess most of the world's goods, and that the righteous are scarcely ever in power. Is it not most evident that the worst men possess most of the world's goods, and that the righteous are scarcely ever in power or affluence? This was the case in Job's time. It is the case still, and therefore prosperity and adversity in this life are no marks either of God's approbation or disapprobation. Sorry. Some of these words I can't really say. I'm not familiar with them. All right, and then verses 35 through 31. Job's strong sense of condemnation. Now my days are swifter than a runner. They flee away and they see no good. They pass by like swift ships, like an eagle swooping on its prey. If I say I will forget my complaint, I will put off my sad face and wear a smile. I'm afraid of all my sufferings, and I know that you will not hold me innocent. And if I am condemned, then why do I labor in vain? If I wash myself with snow water and cleanse my hands with soap, yet you will plunge me into the pit, and my own clothes will abhor me. All right. Now my days are swifter than a runner. They flee away, and they see no good. Yeah, they pass by like swift ships, like an eagle swooping on its prey. All right, MacArthur says, couriers running with messages, ships cutting swiftly, and eagles swooping rapidly. They can convey the blur of painful, meaningless days of despair that just move by. And then Endearing Word says, Job felt that his life was spinning and running completely out of control. Time moved fast and was like a hostile predator against him, like an eagle swooping on its prey. And Job felt that his life was passing by so quickly that his days would be over, and God would leave this whole matter unresolved. All right. And then Job said, if I say I will forget my complaint, and I will put off my sad face and wear a smile. So MacArthur says that Job said if he had promised to change to a happy mood, he would break that promise, and God would add to that. Yeah, and God would add to that his list of accusations. Yeah, if he made that promise that he would change to a happy mood, that ultimately he would break that, and then he would be, and then he would not be held innocent for that and other things in his mind. Yeah, I'm afraid of all my sufferings. I know that you will not hold me innocent. So Job felt, I know that you won't hold me innocent. So Job felt back to endearing word. He felt that he had already been tried and condemned by God, and that it wouldn't even do him, and that it would even do him no good to cleanse himself before God. And he believed that God would just plunge him into the pit again. And then Smick says, Job's experience told him that sometimes God crushes the innocent for no reason at all. We who were privileged to see the drama from the divine perspective know that Job is innocent and that God did have a cause beyond the beyond the purview of Job, a cause that could not be revealed to Job at the moment. All right. So if I'm condemned, then why do I labor in vain? Yeah, why do I labor in vain? If I wash myself with soap water and cleanse my hands with soap, and yet you will plunge me into the pit, my own clothes will abhor me. So MacArthur says, God seems to have found me guilty, so Job concluded, why do I struggle? Even if I make every effort to clean every aspect of my life, you will still punish me. Yeah, this was deep despair and hopelessness. And I'll go on to say this, for those who don't know God, any attempt to try to clean yourself up before God is not going to work. So I just wanted to throw that in there. Yeah, well, Job felt that, even if he did become, I guess, more and more righteous, it's still not going to do any good because he felt like God has condemned him anyway. Yep. All right. If I wash myself with snow water. All right, back to endearing word. So Spurgeon saw that the washing with snow water as a description. Yeah, he saw this washing with snow water as just a description of vain things that sinners do to justify themselves and cleanse themselves of their sin. And so, snow water is hard to get and therefore considered more precious. Snow water has a reputation for purity, and it is thought therefore to be more able to cleanse. Snow water comes down from the heavens and not up from the earth, and it is thought to be more spiritual. Snow water and soap each speak of great effort to be pure. And one can use the purest water and the strongest soap, but it's still impossible to cleanse one's sin by oneself. Yep. But the great hymn, Jesus Paid It All, actually says this. Jesus paid it all to him I owe. Sin had left a crimson stain, he washed it white as snow. There you go. Jesus washes us white as snow. And the more Job considered the greatness of God, the more he felt plunged into the pit of depravity. All right. Now, God may plunge a man into the pit to see his true sinfulness in many different ways. He may bring the memory of old sins to remembrance. He may allow the man to be greatly tempted and thus to know his weakness. He may reveal to the man how imperfect all of his works are, and he may make the man understand the spiritual character of the law, and he may display his great holiness to the man. Yeah, like the prophet Isaiah saw the holiness of God in Isaiah 6, the angels saying, Holy, 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 and Isaiah said, Woe is me, I am a man of unclean lips. So I think the more that you see the goodness and the awesomeness of God and the holiness of God, the more you're going to become aware of your own unholiness and your own sinfulness. And when the Lord and the Holy Spirit convinces a man of sin, the words of Job are none too strong. My own clothes shall abhor me. You may sometimes have abhorred your clothes because they were so dirty that you were ashamed to be seen in them. But you must be dirty indeed when your very clothes seem to be ashamed of you. be ashamed to hang on upon you. This is what the convicted sinner feels, that he is so foul that his very clothes seem to be ashamed of him, as if they would rather have been on anyone else's back than on the back of such a filthy sinner as he is, according to this Spurgeon guy. And the fact that Job is actually realizing that he would not have a chance if he stood before God and tried to plead his case, I mean, that shows that he's even aware of the fact that he's actually even though he holds on to his righteousness, he's not claiming to be without sin. I think he knows well that, he would become aware of his sin, or, he would be accused or condemned, have no of sin if he stood against God. So therefore, he definitely is not claiming to be without sin. Thinks that probably God could find some sin against him and he could be condemned for it, even if he's still claiming to be righteous. So, which is some of what he said previously. And now Job longs for a mediator to help. This is the end of the chapter, verses 32 through 35. Alright, for he is not a man as I am, that I may answer him, and that we should go to court together. Nor is there any mediator between us who may lay his hand on us. Let him take away his rod from me, and do not let the dread of him terrify me. Then I will speak and not fear him, but it is not so with me. Alright. Yeah, so he is not a man that as I am, that I may answer him. Alright, so Endearing Word says that Job here keenly felt the distance between himself and God. He felt unjustly treated by God, yet he felt there was no way to address the problem. And God cannot be confronted with Job's unexplained circumstances, so Job despaired of ever finding any satisfactory answer to the problem. Alright, yep. For he is not a man as I am, that I may answer him, and that we should go to court together. Alright, MacArthur says that Job acknowledged that as a mere man he had no right to call on God to declare his innocence or to contend with God over his innocence. Now, Job was not arguing that he was sinless, but he didn't believe that he had sinned to the extent that he deserved his severe suffering. And Job held on to the same simplistic system of retribution as that of his accusers, which said that suffering was always caused by sin. And he knew that he was not sinless, but he couldn't identify any unconfessed or unrepentant sins. Where is the mercy, he wondered. I can't see anything, wrong that I did in my life to deserve what I got here, so what's the deal? I mean, couldn't this issue get settled? Well, I can't go before God and settle it. I would have no chance. I could not say anything to God, otherwise I could stand condemned or accused or whatever. So, I mean, is there anyone who could plead my case? Yep. Well, I guess there's not any mediator between us who may lay his hand on us both. Yep. I'll get back to MacArthur here. So a mediator, or a court official who sees both sides clearly, as well as the source of disagreement, so as to bring a resolution, was not found. Where was an advocate, an arbiter, or an umpire, or a referee? Was there no one to remove God's rod and call for justice? All right. Now, Endearing Word says, who may lay his hand on us both? Quoting verse 33. Understanding the distance between himself and God, Job longed for someone to bridge the gap between him and God. Job needed someone to sort out the differences between him and God. His prior belief system did not do that. His experience did not do that, neither did the counsel of his friends. Recognizing this need, Job cried out for a mediator between himself and God. And Morgan says this: here then was Job crying out for someone who could stand authoritatively between God and himself, and so create a way of meeting and a possibility of contact. And this cry was actually a good thing. And this Chambers guy says, it showed Job looking outside of himself for answers, yet it was the grief that brought Job to this place. And the grief is the only thing that brings you to this place of looking for help beyond yourself or someone to help you. And joy does not lead to this place, neither does prosperity, but only grief. And we have a great promise of a mediator that Job did not yet know. For there is one God and one mediator between God and men, the man Jesus Christ. 1 Timothy 2:5. What Job longed for is fulfilled in Jesus. He fulfills all of the qualifications for a mediator, someone to stand between two parties in disagreement. The mediator must be accepted by both parties. The mediator must be allowed to fully settle the case. The mediator must be someone able to relate to both parties. The mediator must have the desire to see a happy settlement. And therefore, Jesus had to be God and man, otherwise he would not be a suitable mediator between man and God. Yep, and Job, and this is what Spurgeon has to say. Yeah, I'm done with MacArthur, so... Alright, and Job, well, here's what Spurgeon says. Job began this chapter with the language of the law court. If he wished to contend with him, if one wished to contend with him, to go to court. And here he stands with the picture of a mediator to end the dispute. So basically in the court of law, he tries to make his case before the judge without any help. He would have no chance. Claiming to be righteous, but yet God could find something to condemn him on. Or that claiming to be righteous, it could look as though he was being proud or arrogant, and thus he can be condemned. So is there anyone that can, help plead his case? Alright, and here, so you have this imagery of the law court in this chapter, and here Job ends with the picture of a mediator to end the dispute. The end of Job's dispute will not come until later, but the end of our dispute with God is available now in Jesus Christ. But what is more and more wonderful still, both parties have gained in the suit. Did you ever hear of such a lawsuit as this before? No, never in the courts of men. Yep. Basically, we broke the law. We don't stand a chance against God. We deserve eternal punishment in hell for our sin. But then Jesus comes along and settles that issue. Let me take their punishment. Let me suffer the wrath. And I'll fulfill the law on their behalf. I'll pay the fine so that they can be forgiven. Yep. So I'll deal with this issue between man and God. Yep. So there's the ultimate issue being solved of how a sinner can be reconciled to God. Yep. And Jesus is the only one who can do that. Yep, by taking our punishment in our place and putting our faith in him. We no longer have a dispute with God. We are declared not guilty and declared righteous because of what Jesus has done. Yep, and even when we are believers, Jesus still intercedes for believers, still pleading our case that, even though we still struggle with sin, we are still in Christ, and the Spirit is working in us to make us more and more like Christ and all that. Yeah, even if the devil and others may try to, accuse and do all that stuff. Yeah. But Jesus intercedes and makes the case, for us before the Father. Yeah. Yeah. Amen. Yeah. I mean, apart from Christ, we could not stand before God. And because of Christ, we can approach the throne of God with confidence and come to God with our prayers and petitions. Yeah. Yeah, we have access through the holies of the Holy of Holies because of Christ. Yep. Yep. So anyway, yeah, what wonderful news. All right, let me continue. All right, let him take his rod away from me. As Shebit signifies not only rod, but also scepter or the ensign of royalty, Job might refer to God sitting in his majesty upon a judgment seat, and this sight so appalled him that, filled with terror, he was unable to speak. Yeah, according to this Clark guy. Yeah. Yeah, let him take his rod away from me, and do not let dread of him terrify me. Then I would speak and not fear him, but it is not so with me. All right. Because he lacked a mediator, Job felt that he could not speak with God. Yeah, and this pool guy says, I am not free from his terror, and therefore cannot and dare not plead my case boldly with him, and so, having nothing else to do but ease myself by renewing my complaints. Yeah, just keep launching my complaints to God, since ultimately I can't really, speak with God. Yep. And I have no one to plead my case. Yep. Well, if you have Christ, then, yeah, you can plead your case that, yeah, you may have sinned and whatever, but because you are in Christ, you are forgiven, you are declared not guilty. Yep, and God actually said that Job was righteous in the very beginning, so therefore, he would be not guilty in the sight of God. Now, of course, when calling out for a mediator to plead his case, I'm sure he probably wasn't aware of Jesus Christ, and because this is still the Old Testament period, Jesus is being, prophesied more and more. Yeah, but he hasn't been revealed yet. He hasn't stepped into the world yet. Yeah, now he still exists because he is still God, but he just hasn't, really come on the scene yet to, reconcile man back to God yet. Which is really what the whole Bible is actually about. It's a rescue mission for God to redeem sinners to himself through the person and work of Jesus Christ. And it's only through him that we can actually stand before the judgment seat of God. Yeah, and we can approach the throne of God with confidence. Yeah, but Job felt like there was no such person. Yeah, and therefore he just could not speak to God, even though really he actually could. Yeah, well, if you stand righteous before God, you can actually, speak to him. Yeah, you have access, through him, ultimately through the work of Jesus, and having faith in the one true God, and then person and work of Jesus, who actually is the true God. And ultimately Job and the other Old Testament saints, were pointing to they believed in the coming of the promised one, and therefore had the same faith, that saves. And even the sacrifice of Jesus even covered the sins of the people in the Old Testament. So it was even the work of Jesus that would even cover Job's own sinfulness, and therefore he would be righteous because of his faith. Yeah, the righteous shall live by faith, as it says in Habakkuk 2. Yep. And only then can you actually stand before God. Yeah. So anyway. But it is kind of sad that Job at this time did not, realize this. But that is the case. And that ultimately, he was not being condemned by God, but God was, strengthening him in his faith and helping him hold to his faith. Yeah, with the fact, that he did not ultimately turn away from God. So, God preserves those who are his, who he has declared righteous. Even if they may have their low moments, he will not forsake his people. Yep, and he will not allow his own people to turn away from the faith if they are in fact in the faith. And he will not allow them to curse God, even if the adversary may want to, see that happen, or may try to say that if you just do this, it's going to happen. Yeah, and this just shows that, God will preserve his people, regardless of what accusations are thrown at that person, and he'll use whatever necessary to, make his people into who he would want them to be, or make them more Christ-like or more faithful, and suffering is usually the main way it's done. Alright. And also, just because we suffer, that does not mean that God is far away. Maybe he's right there the whole time, working this out for the good of those who love him and are called according to his purpose, even though we can't really see what that good is at the moment. Or maybe we won't know until we get to the new heaven and the new earth. But anyway, in the meantime, regardless of what happens, I pray that, Lord, you'll help us trust in you regardless of what you have in mind with suffering or prosperity or whatever. But just help us to trust you and to not demand, answers, of like thinking that you're unfair by letting this happen to us or whatever. Because you have your own reasons that we just may not ultimately know about. So, but whatever that is, just help us to trust you and just, take joy whenever we face trials and tribulations. That ultimately it can produce good, godly character, perseverance, endurance, and so on, as it says in James 1. Alright, and I just ask all these things in your Son's holy, precious name. Amen. And until next time, may God richly bless you. The grace and mercy won by Jesus, and the love of God and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit be with you all.